Hi everyone, welcome to today's video where we're going to look at Othello Act 1 Scene 3. We're going to do a quick summary of it and go through the key points. It's a key scene within the play. It's a little longer than the ones that have preceded it and sets a lot of things in motion for the rest of the play. So we are introduced to the Duke. So the Duke and a senator are discussing the reports of a Turkish fleet approaching Cyprus. A sailor comes in to tell them that the ships are headed for Rhodes and not Cyprus. The senator is not convinced by this and says that it might be a trick to make them think that the ships are going to Rhodes when in fact they are going to Cyprus. This shows that the senator and the Duke don't fall for traps easily. They discover that the ships met in Rhodes and are on the way to Cyprus. Now, this mightn't seem significant at the minute, but it's very clear that the Duke and the senator, who are of a political persuasion, they're involved in politics, they see danger coming within. They can see tricks. They can see false information very clearly. And when you go on in the book, you'll notice that Othello and Cassio, honest men who take part in battles, and they don't see danger from within. So Othello is a great general, but he's slow to notice trickery from within. He's slow to notice deception. So the Duke and the senator, they're not easily deceived, and that could be because maybe they're dishonest themselves and they're more open to seeing it, whereas the Othello, being so honest, is more prone to trust in people that he should not. The senator tells the Duke that Brabantio and the brave Moor have arrived. So we see the way that they talk about Othello. Everyone has the utmost respect for him. He's called the brave Moor. So, Othello is asked to go to Cyprus. As soon as Othello enters, the Duke says, "Valiant Othello, we must straight employ you against the general enemy Ottoman." He also welcomes Brabantio, who tells the Duke he did not come about the war, but that he is here because his daughter has been stolen and corrupted by spells and medicines. He is still in disbelief that his daughter would have married Othello and that he must have used some sort of witchcraft. The Duke replies, saying that whoever did this will pay the price, and Brabantio points at Othello and says that he is the guilty party. When asked to explain himself, Othello says that he has spent his life fighting and is little blessed with the soft phrase of peace, but he will do his best to explain that he's not guilty of what he has been accused of. So he's saying he's not great with words, but he'll do his best to explain that he's not guilty. Brabantio talks of his daughter. Brabantio tells the Duke that his daughter is quiet and obedient and that there is no way she could fall in love with someone she feared to look on. Okay, you see the racism that is involved here. Basically saying that she would have been scared of black people because he's basically saying there's no way that a white girl would want to marry a black man. He tells them that you would have to be stupid to think that someone so perfect could go against all rules of nature and that the devil must have had something to do with it. The rules of nature come up again as the scenes progress, and Iago will use this against Othello at some point and saying that it is more natural for a white girl to fall in love with a white man than it would be to fall in love with a black man. The Duke says that there is no evidence of this, and Othello asks for Desdemona to be summoned to speak to the Duke. He says that if Desdemona has anything bad to say about him, let your sentence even fall upon my life. So he said he's willing to sacrifice his life if Desdemona has a bad word to say about him. So he explains how they fell in love. So he sends Iago to get Desdemona and then begins to tell the Duke how their love story came to be. Othello explains how Brabantio used to love him and invite him into his house to hear of the battles he had fought. So there's a certain amount of hypocrisy here from Brabantio, who wanted to hear Othello's stories and was good enough to invite into his home, but he's not good enough to marry his daughter. So there's a bit of social class and racism going on there. So he's not worthy. He doesn't believe he's worthy to marry his daughter. He told him everything from his younger days, his unfortunate mishaps on land and at sea, how he was captured and sold as a slave, and how he bought his freedom. Brabantio loved the stories about the cannibals, and Othello noticed that Desdemona would come back again with a greedy ear, devour up my discourse. Good quote to remember. So Desdemona fell in love with the stories. She wanted to hear more and more stories. She'd cry at the bad things that happened to Othello and that she wished that heaven had made her such a man. So it's clear she's fallen for the stories here. She told Othello that if he had a friend with a story like his, he should teach him how to tell my story, and that would woo her. Othello says he took the hint and spoke to her, telling her his whole story. He explains that Desdemona fell in love with him for the dangers he had survived and that his stories were the only witchcraft he had used. The Duke, believing Othello's story, said his own daughter would be won over by this and urges Brabantio to accept what has happened. Desdemona comes in and she confirms the story. Brabantio says he won't blame Othello if Desdemona confirms the story. But he says to her, "My child, who do you obey here?" And again you see the attitude towards women in this story, that a woman must obey a man, whether it be her father or her husband, that basically that she is subjugated in some way by a man. Desdemona apologises to her father and says she owes him a great deal, but just like her mother who obeyed her husband and not her father, she must now do the same, and that she now obeys Othello. And you'll see here that Desdemona actually plays along. This was the world they lived in, where she basically saw herself as serving her husband, that he was superior to her. Brabantio was forced to give his blessing of the marriage, but says he is done with his daughter and is glad she is an only child, as he'd have the rest locked up. The Duke tells Brabantio to accept it and move on, as worrying about something that has already happened is pointless. So, Othello's asked to go to battle. The Duke asked Othello to go to battle with the Turks, as he is the most experienced man for the job. Again, we see his credentials as a general mentioned many times. So the audience would be building up a certain level of respect for him here as being so brave and noble. Othello agrees, but wants his wife looked after while he is gone, giving her a place to live. The Duke says that she can live with her father, but Brabantio, Othello and Desdemona all agree that this is not acceptable. Desdemona pleads with the Duke to be allowed to accompany Othello as he goes to war. Othello also asked for permission for this, but said it has nothing to do with sex and that he will not be distracted by his wife. The Duke agrees to this as long as they go immediately. So Othello also says that he will not let his marriage get in the way of his rule, okay, which may come back to haunt him, that statement.